Hello, in this video I'm going to be doing some general workshop maintenance stuff and hopefully share some tips with you along the way. First of all, workshop rags. I use them a lot for applying finishes and wiping things down, and as you can see, my drawer of rags at the moment is running quite low. I like to buy cotton bed sheets from charity shops. You can pick these up for £2 or £3. This one here is a duvet cover, and I see this as a win-win-win. You're giving money to charity, you've got loads of useful fabric, and you're putting something that could have ended up in a bin to good use. I'm going to put a respirator on for this job, which might seem a bit silly, but actually you wouldn't believe the amount of dust that these things kick up when you start cutting into them. The workshop air monitor doesn't lie. I make a snip with some fabric scissors and then just tear the fabric, and usually I aim to cut rags around 300mm or 12mm square, but to be honest, whatever size they are, they all get used. And there we have lots of lovely rags to use for future projects. This is typically how my cast iron surfaces look after each and every project. And every 3 or 4 months or so, I just like to give them a good wiping down with an oil wax finish. That's going to protect the metal from rust and also ensure that whatever material you're cutting glides along the surface of the table nice and smoothly. I like to use my own handmade oil wax finishes for this, and these are available for sale on my Etsy store if you want to check them out. There's a food safe version which is great for anything that comes into contact with food, so things like kitchen utensils and chopping boards. The original formula cures a little bit harder and a little bit faster too, because it contains boiled linseed oil, which is a drying oil. It's not a film finish, but it does form a layer of protection that's a little bit harder than the food safe version. And both of these work great on metal, but I prefer the original, so that's what I'm going to use. This just gets rubbed on in a circular motion, and then I can rub away the excess shortly after with a clean cotton cloth and buff it nice and smooth. I also use this on the planer table and thicknesser bed. Applying it specifically to this machine makes a huge difference on how easily material is fed through the machine. And as with any rags that have been used to apply any sort of oil-based wood finish, they need to be disposed of safely because they have been known to spontaneously combust and cause workshop fires. I'd suggest either putting them outside somewhere on a concrete floor and just using a rock to weigh them down, leaving them a couple of days until the oil is fully cured, and then they can be safely thrown away. Or alternatively, you can just put a bit of water in an old metal tin, pop the rags in there and put a lid on, and that should ensure that they won't cause any problems. This is my HVLP extractor, which I use on both my table saw and my planer thicknesser. And as you can see, it has the cartridge style filter, and it has this handle at the top, which is designed for cleaning the filter, and then all of the dust drops down into the bag. And that basically ensures that the filter can breathe more easily and you'll get more efficient extraction. The problem with these mechanisms is that over time they will wear down the inside pleats of the filter. I don't know whether it's fabric or paper, whatever it is, it's going to be worn down by that thing that basically beats each pleat. So I prefer to use a blower on the outside of the filter just to push all of that dust down into the bag beneath. I tend to use a blower with my air compressor for this, but it's a good idea to turn down the airflow first because you don't want it to be too violent. But if you've got one of these style air blowers, they work well too. I'm going to get this bag emptied, and most of the dust I produce goes in this compost bin and then eventually gets used in the garden. As you can see, it's a hive of activity in there. The dust just gets mixed in with grass cuttings and weeds, and occasionally I'll mix it up a bit with a fork and add a bit of water. So that's the dust, but for shavings, these get bagged up and I pass these on to local people who keep horses. However, it's important to make sure that the shavings are safe for horses, as some species of timber are not. But here I have pine and beech, which is perfectly safe, and it's good to find a use for it. Fitting these bags is always a pain with gravity working against you. I like to use some rare earth magnets just to temporarily hold the bag in place. Another option is to use one of these elastic strap things. I can't remember what they're called. I think I saw this on the Tony Works Wood channel. And these are just the right size to hook around. And then with the bag held in place, I can get my metal band latched on. The thing I really dislike about this style of extractors is that when I power this on now, you'll see a puff of dust come up through these ripples at the top of the bag, because the bags don't fit very tightly and the metal band tends to just create these ripples. If anyone has any suggestions about how to solve that, I would love to hear them. While I'm over here, I also need to get my compressor drained. And this is one of those jobs you should do quite frequently. I think they say every time you use your compressor, but I certainly don't do it that regularly. I also need to clean the filters on this. This is my LV-HP vacuum extractor, and it's hooked up to a Cyclone with a large dust collection bucket. I think you are meant to use HEPA filter bags. I think they're called HEPA flow bags in the bottom here, but I never have done, which is probably bad. I tend to just use these two filters here, and also this thing, which is a microfilter. And if you look in the bottom here, you'll see that there's not much dust in here at all. And that's because most of it gets filtered out by the Cyclone and ends up in here. I use the air blower again to clean the filters. And while I'm at it, I'll clean the filters from my air filter too. The Cyclone needs emptying too, and I use these large 240 litre waste bags in this oil drum, just to make life easier when emptying. I'll leave links to where I get these in the description box below. And then I can hook it all back up again. Back to the bandsaw, and I need to get a new blade fitted to this because this one's been on a while and it's pretty dull now. Matt from Badger Workshop and I had a chat about bandsaw blades recently on the Workshop Banter podcast, because we've been talking about how bandsaw blades don't tend to last that long. And one of our listeners suggested an M42 blade, which basically cost about 2.5 times the amount that you would pay for a normal type of blade, but apparently they last up to 10 times longer. And I really want to try one of those, but I haven't ordered one yet because I've got a spare one that I bought previously. So I'm going to fit that today, and in future I'll try the M42 one, and I'll let you know how I get on with that at some point in future. My usual bandsaw blade of choice is one of these. This is a 6mm 4 TPI blade, and I find I can do most cutting applications I need to do on this one. I do have a 12mm 4 TPI blade here, which I would use for things like cutting veneers or resawing boards, but I don't tend to do a lot of that work. If all you're going to be doing is cutting wood, then I wouldn't recommend going any higher than 4 TPI, because that's when you tend to get blade drift. I stick to 3 or 4 TPI blades. They do leave a bit of a rough cut, but I tend to always clean up things with a plane or a sander anyway, so no big deal. Wow, it's a mess in there. Trick for folding up bandsaw blades is to step on it and twist it twice, and then it will roll itself up. As you can probably tell, I don't have any dust extraction hooked up to the bandsaw. I'm going to get the inside cleaned out a bit and then the dust collection drawer emptied, and I'll also spray on some dry PTFE lubricant to the bearings. If you want a tip for unravelling bandsaw blades, I don't have one, but be careful. I'm not going to go into detail on how I set up the bandsaw because there are already loads of good videos about that on YouTube, but personally I like to track the centre of the blade to the centre of the wheel, tension the blade so that it deflects by about this much, and then set my bearings as close as I can get them without touching, which is pretty fiddly to do on this particular bandsaw, especially when it comes to setting the lower guide bearings under the table. Quick test cut and it's all good. And finally, so myself and Leo from the Hand Eye Craft channel, if you're not familiar with Leo's channel, I'll link to it below. We were invited down to the Merca headquarters a few months back. I've got a video about that on my Patreon and YouTube channel membership, by the way, if you'd like to see it. Anyway, when we were there, they showed us this new range of belts that they were working on for belt sanders, and these are Abranet belts. You might already be familiar with Abranet if you've been using the sanding discs, but these are available in belt form now. So I'm going to try one of these on the belt sander because apparently they're supposed to last much longer, and that's a good thing, particularly for this machine, because changing the belts on this is a real pain, and I'll show you why. First, I just need to detension the belt, and I've got to undo all of these red knobs. And then this thing comes off. Then this dust shroud thing is in the way, so this has got to come off too. And then finally, you can get the belt out. Most sanding belts usually have an arrow for which direction they need to run in. I can't see any arrows on this, so I'm assuming it can go in either way. Dust shroud back on, and then back on with the red knobs. I've got this bandsaw cut on a piece of beech which is quite rough, and I'll try and clean that up. And that's now nice and smooth. It took no time at all. These belts are 80 grit, so they're quite coarse, but time will tell how these will hold up. And finally I can get back to work. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos if you'd like to help support the channel, plus get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a named credit at the end of my videos. You'll find links to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership in the description box below. Thanks for watching.